With the Sun Belt East title potentially on the line tonight, let's preview ODU hosting Georgia Southern. It's Locked On Sun Belt.
You are Locked On Sun Belt, your daily podcast on the Sun Belt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sun Belt, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, we got my buddy Scott Jackson. He hosts the afternoons on 94.1 in Norfolk / Virginia Beach. Also does ODU basketball on ESPN+. But we're here to talk about this huge football game. Old Dominion hosting Georgia Southern, ESPN2 tonight. And it is a big, big matchup with potentially the winner of this ball game in the driver's seat for the Sun Belt East title. We talk about ODU overcoming an 0-3 and 1-4 start. We talk about them going to Colton Joseph. We talk about them replacing all of the talent that left via the transfer portal and what those expectations were in August and what they have turned into. And we even throw in a little Mike Jones basketball chit-chat at the end. It is Scott Jackson. He hosts afternoons on 94.1 in Norfolk and Virginia Beach, and he is Locked On Sun Belt. All right, welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sun Belt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. We're joined by Scott Jackson, the host of The Scott Jackson Show on 94.1 in Norfolk, Virginia Beach. Really appreciate your time, Scott. Huge Sun Belt East showdown. The Sun Belt East title could be on the line. ODU turning their season around, hosting Georgia Southern. It did not start out very well for the Monarchs. What did you think after their 0-2 start where they could have been 2-0? Maybe should have been.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a lot of the thought was like, wow, this team, they haven't played poorly, but, they've also just missed out in a couple areas, like that game at South Carolina, just a few breakdowns by the offense, just giving the Gamecocks a short field. The game against East Carolina was frustrating because the defense kept giving the offense great opportunity, short fields, and they couldn't do anything with it. And that was tough. I mean, they played pretty good for a half against Virginia Tech and then really got housed in that second half. And then, of course, the big road win at Bowling Green after that kind of got them in a better rhythm. But they also lost their quarterback, Grant Wilson, in that game after the first half. And then, obviously, you mentioned Colton Joseph getting in there. And the redshirt freshman has, he's had his moments where he's been spectacular. And then there's times where you say, okay, yeah, he's still, a guy who's very inexperienced, and you can see it. But, yeah, it's been a nice turnaround for this team. And, again, even when they were – an 0-3, I didn't feel like it was a bad team. But again, if you don't have the results, you wonder how teams will take that and how will handle it mentally. But and obviously, they've done a nice job climbing out of the hole.
What did we hear from Ricky Ronnie at that time? And we can take, I mean, I know it goes on the record, but okay, yeah. Virginia Tech. Sure. They weren't going to win that ball game. But they could have won and probably should have won the first two ball games, which were very frustrating. And yet he seemed to keep the team together.
Yeah, I mean, look, he has this 1-0 mentality. It's really boring for us media guys when we interview him. He's like, got to go 1-0 every day and all this kind of stuff. But it's true. It has grounded the team, and they've been in these predicaments before where they've had, tough starts. They've had to get out of them in his tenure here, and they've done a nice job, battling back and never really giving up on the season. They played a lot of close games, obviously, throughout his time, especially last year where they had the record of the nation. And then this year it's kind of been a little bit more of the same, although last week was homecoming, and it was pretty nice to win a 10-point game, even though it was late into 2 minutes when they went up by 10. But it played like a one-score game throughout, but it ended up being a little bit bigger than that. But yeah, I mean, I think he does a really good job of keeping what's important in front of this team and not getting caught up in all the, oh my God, we lost this game and this team won and all the other stuff, and just kind of focusing on each and every week. And they've handled adversity well with injuries here this season because they've lost some key guys at times, and they just keep going. I mean, they keep plugging along. There's no excuses.
Was there a moment in that? Was there a moment in that game with Bowling Green that seemed to turn things around?
Well, they just got off to a great start. After the bye week, like the offense looked different. I mean, and Grant Wilson was in a great rhythm and was making plays. And then, of course, like I said, he goes down with the injury. So they got to go to the freshman, Colton Joseph, after that. And Colton made some big plays there in that football game as well. And, I think just the belief that they had in themselves at halftime that, okay, we're going to finish this game even though we've lost our starting quarterback, I think was a big part of it. And, for the most part, their defense has really been good this year outside of really the Coastal Carolina game. I think the defense has really brought it and has kind of been the catalyst for things. And it's kind of like, okay, is the offense going to show up and play at a high level today? And I think that's kind of been the thing that they've been wrestling with at times. But, the last few weeks they found a strong enough offensive output with a defense that's really put them in some great spots.
Talking with Scott Jackson, afternoon host on 94.1 in Norfolk/Virginia Beach. Scott Jackson Show. We appreciate his time. He's locked down Sunbelt, your team every day. All right, so let's talk about that Coastal Carolina game because it could have gone off the rails with that. All of a sudden, we're in conference play after a nice win over Bowling Green, and you get up by 10. They were 17-7, and I think Coastal scored 28 unanswered points before ODU could put some more points on the board.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, Coastal just housed them in that stretch there, and really it was the latter part of the second quarter that really cost them that football game, and they battled back, made it close. Again, Colton Joseph, that was his first start at that point in the conference on the road. Technically, he started the Virginia Tech game, but he played 2 series or whatever it was before they made the move back to Quinn Hinnackel in that game, but. He was much better in that game. The offense was much better, more explosive. But boy, penalties were crazy in that game for the Monarchs. Really hurt them, and Coastal had some as well. And then there was just a couple turnovers that obviously did not help their cause either. But yeah, I mean, after that, I think they did a good job. Kind of settling themselves because that was the third. That was the second game of this 3-game in a row on the road. Bowling Green, Coastal, then Georgia State, and they came out in Georgia State and really, at that time Georgia State was riding pretty high. They had the win obviously over Vanderbilt, and they were coming off a bye. This might not be a good setup for ODU, but again, ODU really went in there and kind of dominated. I mean, this is a 7-point game, but it felt like it should have been a much bigger ODU win that night, or that afternoon, I should say. But their defense was really lights out against at that point, a Georgia State team was putting a lot of points on the board, a lot of yards.
Yeah, did you talk to Ricky Ronnie after that ball game? Because again, you're playing in a big stadium and it's usually rather empty, unfortunately for Georgia State. And we talked about this with ULM, and it's a situation where it may not be this season, but in past years, you have to bring your own energy, and it's very tough because road teams feed off fans. There's no fans to feed off of. What did they say like winning against Georgia State was? Because they're the ones that have to bring the energy because you can't feed off the fans because there's no fans to feed off of. Even if there are some fans, you're in a huge stadium.
Yeah, I think for them at that point, it was just like, man, you got to get a conference win, right? This is the next game. I mean, yeah, you're not really dealing with any crowd noise or anything like that there. It is an awkward setup of the way the stadium is, and there's just not a lot of people, as you said, involved there. But I think this team was so focused that day on what they had to do and what it would mean to them with the position they put themselves in going into the homecoming game last weekend. Coming back home, and I think that's what they did a really good job of. And they missed some opportunities there. I felt like I said that's the offense, man. They really missed some big play opportunities and things that really could have come back and bit them in that football game. But the defense just kept answering the bell every time they needed them to, and they missed. Georgia State converts an onside kick, and then the defense comes out and literally sacks the quarterback, causes a strip fumble, and they fall on it. And, able to make a big play there. So it was an interesting game because I think it should have been a little bit more of a, hey, yeah, we got this kind of game, but they kind of had to fight themselves a little bit. But bottom line is they got the road W.
Talking to Scott Jackson, host of the Scott Jackson Show, 94.1 in Norfolk/Virginia Beach, 3 to 7 p.m. Eastern time. What about that 4-hour show in the afternoon, brother? A lot of people not doing that anymore. You got to get it cut 3 to 6.
Yeah, man. Well, we do. We get a lot of play-by-play. So there is a stretch like we have AAA baseball, the Tides, as you know. So during the summer, there's a lot of 3 to 6:15s. 3 to 6. Sometimes there are some weird road places, even some 5:40s. So yeah, and then when basketball starts, we have men's ODU and the women as well a lot of nights. So yeah, we'll be getting out early. So here and there, but no complaints. It's a lot of fun. As you say, there's not a lot of these 3 to 7s anymore. Heck, there's just not a lot of these locally anywhere. I mean, period. You know how it is. I mean, it's a tough industry. So I love getting the opportunity to come in there every day and chop it up.
Scott also does ODU basketball on ESPN Plus, right?
That is correct. Yeah, we got a game in Well, less than 2 weeks now, which is pretty crazy. November 4th, opener, Mike Jones's debut when they take on Buffalo, which should be a lot of fun.
All right, we will. We'll talk about Mike at the end of the episode. All right, let's take a time out. We'll come back and talk more with Scott Jackson, host of 94.1 in the afternoons, the Scott Jackson Show, 3 to 7 p.m. We will talk about Grant Wilson's injury, but Colton Joseph taking over for him, obviously, and how the offense is managed with so many guys that transferred out and transferred in, and same for the defense, and obviously dealing with a huge injury for most of the season to Jason Henderson. We'll do that right after I tell you about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out our latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Still liking the Arkansas State line. It's up to 7.5 hosting Troy. And as we know, unfortunately, Goose Crowder is out for the rest of the season, the Troy starting quarterback. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's get back to our conversation with 94.1's afternoon host, Scott Jackson. We talk about the Grant Wilson injury and Colton Joseph taking over, and who has taken over and filled in offensively and defensively, who's played well this year for the Monarchs. He is, again, Scott Jackson. Let's talk about, first of all, Grant Wilson. Do we have an injury update?
Yeah, I don't know right now. ODU, like a lot of schools, they don't have to share the injury updates in the Sun Belt. It's not the SEC or the NFL, so you don't have to really give us anything. But he was not even dressed out last week, was in shorts in his jersey, and has a left elbow injury, it looks like, or left arm injury, I guess, is what it is. So it's his non-throwing arm, which is good news. I know asking Coach Ronnie about it last week, he said he was still working hard and trying to get himself potentially back on the field this year. But I think right now, the mindset is this is obviously Colton Joseph's team right now, and they're going forward with Colton. And Colton's done some good things. I mean, he's a heck of an athlete, and gives him a different dimension. But yeah, I mean, I think they love the Grant's leadership, and obviously the knowledge of the offense is off the charts because he was with Coach Decker at Fordham before he came to ODU.
So do they change anything? Because is he more of a running quarterback than Grant Wilson? Do they change things in? Do they install things and have installed more as we've gone along with him being the quarterback?
Well, I mean, Grant had the option to run too. Grant actually was a pretty good runner himself, but not like Colton has a little different gear where he gets away from guys that, that Grant probably doesn't, or Grant takes the slide and Colton just keeps going. So I think there's certainly, like this last game, there's more opportunities for him to run against Texas State. He did a really good job with that. He's had other games where he doesn't run as much, but yeah, in the red zone in particular, I mean, he's a weapon. I mean, he had the 3 TD runs this past week, obviously, in their win. There's no question about that. I mean, they've always been a run-based offense. I know spread, you throw the ball 50 times. No, actually, this spreads you out, and they make you, defend the entire field, right? And a lot of it is to get you some large running lanes in this offense. They ran the ball very well last year with a combination of backs. And this year, they've had, like last year, some backs get hurt and then other guys come in. But it's consistently been a pretty good running offense. And I think with Colton in there, he adds a little bit more of a home run dimension to that running game. Although Grant had a huge touchdown run earlier this year in their game at Bowling Green. So, I mean, it's not like he's not capable of doing it, but Colton definitely has better wheels. And, I think Colton over time, just got to work on the accuracy. Sometimes he doesn't have the best fundamentals. As we'd like to say, misses some layups, some easy pass plays. Those are the short ones, the intermediate ones he seems to struggle with. Got a big arm, though. But I think you're seeing every week get a little bit more confidence is building. And, this Georgia State game will be a huge challenge for him under the big lights. And, passed a pretty big test last week, though, against a really good Texas State team.
So tell us, ODU, like a lot of teams, went through, huge transfers, running backs, wide receivers, which was interesting after the kind of season that ODU had last year. Maybe it was NIL deal. Who has stepped up this year for ODU in running and receiving?
Well, Pat Conroy, the tight end's been a real nice addition. They really haven't had a tight end, a pass catching tight end, but he's been a really good addition, transfer from Merrimack. And then you've had, Isaiah Page, who was here before, is still really their top receiver when things get going. Deontay Vines, who came over from Iowa, has been getting more and more each week too. Running back wise, Aaron Young, the transfer from Rutgers, has been really the lead back. Devin Roche, who was here last year, got hurt in the South Carolina game and then was in and out, but had some really big plays in that Coastal game and incorporated himself back in as kind of the number 2 back now. And Bryce Duke, who's from Virginia Tech, is more of the receiving back of the 3. He mixes in there as well. And then obviously the quarterback, in this case, Colton Joseph, is a big part of this running game. But, that's what they have. They have other receivers, that have not been getting as many opportunities. But they do have guys that are definitely capable. It's a deep group. And I think the offensive line has improved as the year's gone on. And they've done a lot of shuffling there. And, they've had some injuries too, unfortunately, that have had to kind of move some guys around. But, that's also that group seems to be getting better every week. The protection's been a little bit stronger each week for whoever the quarterback's been.
It's one thing when you're replacing transfers with other transfers, but then you got to go down the depth chart, and they lost Jason Henderson early on this year. I guess he's redshirting for the rest of the year and planning on coming back next season. He's going to obviously be Dr. Jason Henderson when he's done with all of this, maybe also a lawyer. Who stepped up in his place, and how serious is that injury? Do we know?
Well, Koa Nawatola has been the guy, and he played in the bowl game last year. It's an excellent fill-in role. And he was, really in week 1, you could tell Jason was not Jason. He wasn't running well in that South Carolina game to the point where they took him off the field, and Koa was playing a lot more. It was noticeable. When Koa was in there, he was a much more impactful guy. I don't know if it's not a re-injury necessarily, but I think he's just still not back, right, from the ACL. Think about it. He got injured in that Georgia State game. End of the final regular season game was the game that got them in the bowl. So, he came back really quickly, like all guys do now. Everybody tries to be Adrian Peterson, and not everybody is obviously Adrian Peterson when it comes to coming back from an ACL. And here's a guy who really relied on, his lateral quickness, and he just didn't have it right now. And so it'll be interesting, maybe by the end of the year, they didn't rule it out, but they're not putting pressure on him if, as you can play in 4 games and not burn your red shirt. So maybe he can, plug it at some point and play again if he feels well enough. But maybe just wait it out until the end of the season and, then see where we go from there. If he's, a guy that stays at ODU, or does he, get in the transfer portal, and see what's out there and other opportunities, in this world we're in with the NIL, who knows? But obviously a guy who was a preseason All-American, expected to do a lot of big things for them this year. Is a big leader for them, but it's not something they were not used to. It wasn't like, oh no, what do we do now? Because they already knew Koa could fill in, and Koa's been a hard guy in the program, and he's done an excellent job.
Yeah, Koa's second on the team in tackles. We're talking to Scott Jackson, host of the Scott Jackson Show, 94.1 in the 757, if you will. 3 to 7 p.m. We're talking ODU. They are hosting Georgia Southern on Thursday night. They're hosting them tonight. It's coming up tonight. So let's talk about the game a little bit, because as someone who has been a little fortunate over the last 3 weeks in the games that we have may or may not have wagered on, we realize how lucky some of those wins are. All right. We always get mad at the losses, but we realize how fortunate we are to cover a game or two that maybe we shouldn't. And Georgia Southern shows you how fortunate they were, right? They were getting hammered. Their quarterback goes down. They're losing 25-3, and they go on to beat Marshall 24-23. And then they take care of JMU, and all of a sudden they're atop the standings in the Sun Belt East. ODU, after an 0-3 start and 1-4 start overall, they're 2-1 in the Sun Belt. They take down Georgia Southern at home, which they are favored in this game, and all of a sudden they're atop the Sun Belt standings. J.C. French had struggled a little bit heading into last week's ball game. 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He threw 3 of each, so he's got 10 and 5. What does ODU do defensively to try and slow down Georgia Southern?
Well, I think they just got to keep doing what they've been doing. They've been good on all 3 levels. Like, their defensive line does a really good job, creating pressure and getting pressure, and also being disciplined with their pass rush as well. And I think that's been a big part of it. And it's helped the guys in the back end, obviously getting guys off their spot. They did an awesome job against Jordan McLeod. But Jordan McLeod looked out of sorts the entire game against ODU, outside of maybe 1 or 2 throws. And I think they got to do the same thing with French, kind of the way, again, outside of the Coastal game, they have been really good. Discipline, winning the line of scrimmage has been a big thing for them. And the secondary, they got some ball hawks back there. They take it away. They know, kind of how to bait some guys into some things and take their chances when they need to. And look, they need to tackle well. I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's true. I mean, the games that they've performed poorly, there's a lot of missed tackles, a lot of sloppiness, missed assignments, those kind of things. But I think when they've been at their best, it's because, hey, they're really flying the ball, they're tackling as a group. And, that's the other thing Ricky Ronnie talks a lot about. If you swarm the ball, even if somebody misses a tackle, somebody else is there to make it, right? If, somebody else isn't able to do it. And that's been a big part of what they've done defensively. But I think all three levels of this defense, Blake Seibert does a tremendous job getting these guys ready, and they really do a good job setting the tone for this football team. And like I said, there's that East Carolina game in particular, the second one, really is frustrating because the defense did so many good things to set up the offense for success, and they weren't able to take advantage of it. But as you saw last week, when they got turnovers, the offense cashed in, and then they obviously had the game-sealing turnover late as well, takeaway to this defense. So I think they just got to continue to play sound assignment football and do the things they've been doing in these other games in the Sun Belt, and much like they did against Bowling Green. I think they'll be all right.
All right, so let's flip the script. Georgia Southern's defense, stats aren't all that great because they got games against Boise and Ole Miss, but you take those games out and the statistics look pretty good, and they did a number on JMU as well. What does ODU try to do offensively against Georgia Southern's tough defense?
Well, they're going to do what they always try to do. Try to run the football. They're going to try to get what they can get in the passing game and hit you over the top. And when they do take their shots, obviously Colton's got to deliver the ball. He's got to let it rip and be smart with the football too. He's been fortunate. There's been a couple games, where he's made some really bad mistakes with the football, and they've hurt him before in the Coastal game in particular, and then the game against. Georgia State, he got away with a couple there and threw one into some traffic to get picked off there. But he's just got to be smart with the football like he was last week, continuing to do that, and pick his spots when to keep it. I mean, I think he's got a really good feel with the option plays, whether he's keeping it or giving it. I think he's made some really good decisions there, and continue to do that. And I think it'll open everything up and keep this offense balanced. But that's and obviously the offensive line needs to do a good job when he is in drop back situations to keep him clean.
All right, let's take one more time out. When we come back, we'll get Scott Jackson to preview tonight's ball game between Old Dominion and Georgia Southern. He'll make his pick. And even at the end, we'll talk a little ODU hoops with Mike Jones returning, ODU's favorite son, as the head coach of the Monarchs. Let me tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 corrected picks. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with injury insurance, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's wrap up our conversation with 94.1's afternoon host Scott Jackson. We preview Old Dominion hosting Georgia Southern, what the Monarchs have to do to win this football game, and we even throw in a little Mike Jones chit-chat at the end, the new head coach of the ODU Monarchs. He is Locked On Sunbelt. He is Scott Jackson. Talking to Scott Jackson, host of the Scott Jackson Show, 3 to 7 p.m., 94.1 in Norfolk, Virginia Beach. All right, so expectations were not that high for ODU in terms of could they contend, right? It was going to be JMU, it was going to be App State, and maybe if things came together, Georgia Southern. I guess Marshall has been playing better as well. I mean, they have a shot. Do they? I'll pose a question instead of a statement. Do you believe they have a shot to win the Sun Belt East? And did you expect anything close to that in August?
Well, I think in August, everybody feels good, right? Everybody's positive, and everybody thinking ODU camp is very positive. They thought they were better in a lot of areas. So I thought, hey, they might have a shot to be in the mix, right? I didn't know if they'd really be able to, jump in front of some of those teams. And frankly, I didn't know what to expect from Madison. It's a whole new staff, it's a whole new team. They lost a lot of players too, their quarterback. And, they've had some good wins, but they've also, had some tough losses here in the early going. I mean, losing to UL Monroe on the road and then just his last game to Georgia Southern. So they've shown that they could bleed this year, unlike last season where they took it as late as they did before they took that L to App State. But, yeah, I think, look, if you win this game tonight, then everything's open to you, right? Everything's at your disposal, right? At that point, you got to go on the road. It's going to be tough going to App. It's going to be very emotional, I'm sure, with all they've been through, and you get to have a home game again. But, at the same time, ODU is going to have this mini bye. And hopefully, if you're coming off a win, you're going to handle it the right way, get some people healthier and going into that. And the game before Madison sets up nicely for them because they have a bye week before that game as well. So I think there are some things that you can say, yeah, I could see them, especially if they can get this Georgia Southern game. And if you can go down and, go over and win at App, then, yeah, you've built enough momentum where you should feel like you can win the East. And then, late in the season, they'll have Marshall coming back in here as well before the Thanksgiving weekend. So that'll be a big game too. But, yeah, I mean, you got to take them one at a time. But if you get this Georgia Southern game, I mean, everything's on the table at that point.
What kind of crowd are we expecting tonight?
The student section I know is going to be filled up and fired up. They've been tremendous this year. It's supposed to be close to capacity. Hopefully it will get there. You got military appreciation night here too. I know we're going to have a lot of really cool things in the stadium for the military tonight, which should add to the environment. So that should be fun. But yeah, I think it'll be close to a sellout. I think 3 of the 4 home games to this point, or 3 of the, I guess it's 3 home games now, have been sold out so far. The ECU, Virginia Tech, homecoming did not sell out. So I guess 2 of the 3 have sold out, but homecoming wasn't quite a sellout. But
which is kind of odd.
Yeah, which is weird. It was a weird, it was a weird weekend, and I don't know if Texas State people just weren't excited about that or what, but it ended up being a hell of a game. I mean, they blew it because it was a beautiful day for football, and it was a lot of fun to be there.
All right, so do you have a prediction for this game tonight? Because usually I was going to bet Georgia Southern, but now you know what? I'm holding off because it's.
I think ODU wins a close one. I think it helps that they're home after playing at home, and Georgia Southern with the travel in the short week. I think that matters. So I think you look like at a tight game, like a 21-14, 21-17 kind of football game.
Well, I agree with that. I just think winning on the road, as we've seen that Texas State has struggled to win on the road. Yeah. JMU has struggled to win on the road. Louisiana has won, but struggled at Southern Miss to win on the road, where they hadn't won in like 31 years, maybe more than 31 years. So winning on the road in college football, I don't care if it's by 1 or by 10, unless I'm picking you. You better win by 10. So we cover. But, winning on the road is hard. All right, so let's wrap things up with Scott Jackson, host of the Scott Jackson Show. That's a convenient name for your show. Good thing that they hired you so you could fill those shoes. 94.1 in Norfolk and Virginia Beach, 3 to 7 p.m. All right, let's talk Mike Jones and ODU hoops. What are we looking at this year?
It's a deep team. I mean, they got a lot of depth. They got a lot of length, some size. Callum Swanton-Roger, who came over from Maryland, I think is going to be an impact player in this conference. I think, they've got a lot of interesting parts. I think they're still trying to sort it out, like who the first 5 are going to be. Really like 2 or 3 spots, maybe in the starting 5. But I think they're going to play a deep rotation. I think they're going to definitely be a team that wants to play tempo, play fast, shoot threes, obviously, and defend very hard. And, I think, although ODU fans won't want me to hear me say this, but I think it's going to be kind of a little bit like VCU in the sense that you're going to have guys play until the tank's empty, and they're going to bring in another group that's going to play until the tank's empty and bring it back in, and you're going to play it that way. And I think people are going to be excited to see this group. But they're still building chemistry, brand new staff, a lot of new players. Really, the returning players, I don't know. None of them have a guaranteed role. The guys that are coming back, so that makes it interesting too. But yeah, I mean, I think nobody cares more about ODU basketball than Mike Jones, and it's exciting to have him here. And I saw him as a player when I went to school here, and to have him here with the staff that he's put together, and it's going to be something. And this first year, I think what they got done in the portal has been pretty impressive. So looking forward to see how it kind of plays out on the court.
So I know he talks a lot, as we got one more question for Scott Jackson. I know he talks a lot about football, as we all do, hosting shows and such, and a little college sports in there as well, obviously. But for those who don't know, Scotty Jackson is a baseball guy. So we got Yankees and Dodgers coming up. Wondering if you think when they get ready in a little pregame conversation, is it a little awkward for John Smoltz and Dave Roberts, since Dave Roberts took John Smoltz deep on the Smoltz rehab assignment? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I never really thought about it that way, but now that you said it to me, you got me thinking back on the Jacksonville Suns days, right?
Yeah.
That's good. I like that. By the way, could Major League Baseball have drawn up a better World Series themselves? Right. Let's get the 2-3 biggest stars. I think Juan Soto's a huge star too. With Ohtani and Judge, and then Soto's stealing the show in the American League throughout this postseason. And let's just put them on the stage. And of course, it's New York and LA.
So hopefully at least goes 6 or 7 games.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping for. Scott Jackson, host of the Scott Jackson Show, 3 to 7 p.m., 94.1 in Norfolk and Virginia Beach. Really appreciate your time, Scotty J. Thank you so much. And we're looking forward to tonight's ballgame.
Me too, Schultz. Thanks.